So I'm actually standing right now at the site of the former Well Meadow Cafe in Paisley. It's actually a site of a very famous law case. When I was at university, I studied 3 different cases in case law. Even though I wasn't studying law itself, in our small section on law, one of the cases we studied was the Donahue versus Stevenson case. Mrs. Donahue, she had been invited to the cafe, met up with her friend in the Well Meadow Cafe right here in Paisley, and she was bought a bottle of ginger beer, which her friend gave her. And in the bottle of that ginger beer was a decomposing snail, and she got very sick, and she was a state of shock afterwards. At that time in law, there was nothing to go and say that the manufacturer of the bottle with the snail in had any responsibility to Mrs. Donahue. As she hadn't bought the bottle herself, she couldn't sue under contract law. There was no relationship between Mrs. Donahue and Mrs. Stevenson, who actually had manufactured the bottle of ginger beer. And she thought there should be some responsibility here. And this case went all the way through. It took 4 years and lots of persecution, actually, Mrs. Stevenson. Mrs. Donahue, through that case. And in 1932, it went all the way up to the House of Lords, and Lord Aiken decided over the case. In order to go and help him decide, he used the Bible. We live in a country based on Christian principles, and he looked at the Bible to say and ask the question, who is my neighbour? And he looked to the parable of the Good Samaritan to answer the question of who is my neighbour. And what I find is really interesting about this parable is Jesus tells it in response to the greatest commandments. The first greatest commandment is to love God with all your mind, all your heart, and all your soul. And the second is like it. It's to love your neighbour as yourself. And then to illustrate that second commandment, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan, there's a man who is being beaten up and robbed and left for dead at the roadside. And his fellow countrymen walk by and do nothing about his condition. But then along comes a Samaritan, the hero of the story. And he picks up the man who's been left for dead, puts him on his own donkey, and he takes him to an inn. And he says to the innkeeper, look after him, take care for him, bandage his wounds, and if I owe you anything, next time I come back, I will pay you. The thing about the Samaritans at the time was, Jesus is telling this to a Jewish audience. The Samaritans and the Jews, they were enemies. They had a different religion, they had a different background, they were neighbours to each other, and they just did not like each other. They hated each other. And yet the very person that Jesus says, who is my neighbour, was a Samaritan. That person of a different religion, that person of a different background, that person was completely different to the people he's telling that story to. And it's that story that Lord Aiken used to say, who is my neighbour? And this law, the law of tort, is still in use today. In fact, it's one of the most famous cases, and it's been transported to many legal systems all around the globe.